British lawmakers in Taipei say it's right to engage with Taiwan as London's relations with Beijing sour. Taiwan's local elections leave a messy aftermath for trash collectors to clean up. Out with the old and in with the new, Taipei is getting ready to say goodbye to its first generation of YouBikes. Plus, 2 years after he was first detained, Hong Kong media mogul Jimmy Lai's trial has been postponed, awaiting a ruling from Beijing that could have far-reaching consequences. A warm welcome to TaiwanPlus News. I'm Erika Liu. The leader of a British delegation to Taiwan has said it's entirely right that democracies engage in dialogue with each other. The 5-member group of British parliamentarians met with Taiwan's President Tsai Ing-wen on Friday in a trip that China has already condemned. James Chater reports.
Taiwan's president shaking hands with the first British parliamentary committee to visit the country in 16 years. While in Taiwan, the cross-party group of 5 British lawmakers discussed defence cooperation and democratic resilience. It's all part of the UK's foreign policy tilt to the Indo-Pacific.
Because dialogue matters, Madam President, and it's entirely right that democracies engage in interparliamentary dialogue to better understand one another, to share experiences, and to discover opportunities for the deepening of those friendships.
The trip comes amid souring ties between the UK and China. Beijing claims Taiwan as part of its territory and condemns any interactions between Taiwanese and foreign officials. UK-China tensions spiked in October after a protester outside China's consulate in Manchester claimed he was beaten by Chinese officials. And more recently, Chinese authorities detained a BBC journalist covering anti-COVID protests in Shanghai. Both accusations China disputes. But there are deeper concerns over what London describes as Beijing's systemic challenge to democracy worldwide, all of which led British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak this week to declare that a golden era of warmer ties between the UK and China had ended.
Now let's be clear, the so-called golden era is over, along with the naive idea that trade would automatically lead to social and political reform.
But Sunak also said the UK must stay pragmatic in its dealings with China, leading some British MPs to criticise Sunak as being too soft on the country.
How do you think he's been receiving your trip here in Taiwan, and have you been in touch with the Prime Minister during your trip to Taipei?
No, I have been unable to speak to the Prime Minister while I was here, but I do think that he is right and that the golden era is over with China. But that doesn't mean that we have to cut off China. But it is about robust pragmatism. I agree with him entirely. Pragmatism of the fact that we cannot cut off one of our biggest trading partners, pragmatism in the fact that we are one economic global model, but also robust in that we have to put down red lines.
China's embassy in London has denounced the trip to Taiwan, describing it as a gross interference in China's internal affairs. It added, the Chinese embassy condemns this and has made solemn representations with the UK side. Moves of the UK that undermine China's interests will be met with forceful responses from the Chinese side. The UK says its golden era of relations with China is over, but Beijing's shadow still looms large over London's relations with Taipei. Damon Lin and James Chater for TaiwanPlus.
Japan's top envoy to Taiwan has said that relations between the two nations are at their best ever, and their partnership is irreplaceable. Hiroyasu Izumi was speaking at an event celebrating the 50th anniversary of the founding of the Japan-Taiwan Exchange Association, Tokyo's de facto embassy in Taiwan. He emphasized that trade between the two countries had grown by more than $80 billion in the last 50 years. Izumi also added that Taiwan's international status has risen significantly since he took the post in 2019. Taiwan's ruling Democratic Progressive Party, or DPP, may introduce a new cabinet next year. It comes after the DPP suffered a heavy defeat in last month's local elections. Now, Premier Su Jin-chang says the party is discussing possible changes to its governing team. Su said if a reshuffle were to happen, it would be after the current legislative session at the end of this month. Taiwan's President Tsai Ing-wen has already stepped down from her role as DPP chair after taking responsibility for the election results. The party will now hold a vote to decide its next leader ahead of a crucial year. January 2024 will see Taiwan hold presidential and legislative elections, with Tsai unable to run again after having served 2 terms in office. Taiwan's main opposition, Kuomintang, or KMT, has named Wang Hongwei as their candidate in a by-election for a vacant legislative seat. The seat in Taipei City was originally held by Taipei Mayor-elect Jiang Wan-an of the KMT. Jiang resigned as a legislator last month to run in the election for Taipei mayor, triggering the by-election. Wang will face against Enoch Wu of the ruling Democratic Progressive Party. The seat has always been held by a member of the KMT. Wang says she will campaign on providing more social services to constituents. Taiwan's local elections are done, but not quite dusted. For cleanup crews, there's still lots of work to do. As Jean Van Trieste reports, this election cycle has produced large amounts of garbage in the form of campaign materials. That's led some people to call for a rethink on how candidates get their message out.
Just a week ago, these election banners were important tools to boost the profiles of candidates. Now that last week's local elections are over, they've served their purpose and are just trash. In Taipei, cleanup crews have taken down more than 10,000 banners. In the southern city of Kaohsiung, more than 30,000. Only the poles holding them up are recyclable. The banners themselves are bound for the incinerator. These flags given out at rallies are all headed there too. The environmental impact of all this garbage and the extra labor needed to clean it up have some wanting future candidates to adopt a less wasteful approach to campaigning.
避免造成环境脏乱，维持市容整洁，或可多利用电子媒体等数位宣传方式进行竞选广告。
Taiwan and the world are slowly listening to calls for more environmentally friendly practices. But so far, Taiwan's politicians haven't got the message. Andy Xue and John Van Trieste for TaiwanPlus.
Taiwan's capital is saying farewell to its first generation of YouBikes, a bicycle sharing system that started almost 15 years ago. Older bikes will no longer be used, replaced by the newer 2.0 version from Saturday. Our reporter Jaime Okan went to see how locals feel about the transition.
This is one of hundreds of YouBike stations across Taipei, which is getting ready to phase out its older 1.0 version of its bicycles in favor of the newer 2.0 version.
YouBike is Taiwan's bike-sharing program. It started 15 years ago and was inspired by similar systems in Europe. Taiwan began rolling out the 1.0 version in 2009, using these orange bikes. Then, in 2021, the country rolled out the newer, white-framed 2.0 version, with a new locking system and a touchscreen. As of this year, YouBikes can be found in 8 different cities and counties around Taiwan. Many people here say that YouBikes are hard to beat for convenience, as they are practically everywhere in the capital.
我觉得是说台湾的 YouBike 是非常的方便的一个交通工具，而且就是觉得很便宜。对，然后对我平常都是用 YouBike 移动的。
Although Taipei is getting rid of the first version, neighboring New Taipei is keeping the older bikes. City officials say that thousands of bikes from the capital won't go to waste. They'll be sent to southern Taiwan to help grow the system there.
12月3号 YouBike 1.0 正式引退，退休以后，你知道可以用的我们就转送给我们原乡的朋友。
People in Taipei say that ditching the 1.0 system will make returning bikes a lot easier.
全部都2.0会比较好，有点麻烦啦，因为有时候不知道的人骑错也不知道去哪。
The move to the newer 2.0 system is part of a plan to make Taipei more accessible. The city says it plans to build over 1,200 stations by the end of 2022, and that would mean a YouBike station on almost every intersection. Kamashu and Jaime Okan for TaiwanPlus.
Traffic can be pretty bad in Taiwan, especially in packed city centers. To catch more drivers who break the rules, Taipei has expanded an artificial intelligence detection system that police have been using to curb traffic violations. As Erika reports, the broadened AI system is already producing results.
driving on sidewalks, crossing the center line, not yielding for pedestrians. Driving violations like these are common in Taipei, especially during rush hour. To make sure offending motorists are caught, the city government has expanded its artificial intelligence traffic monitoring system. The AI is already being used in 11 places around Taipei, and the system is being expanded to include more traffic hotspots. After years of dodging traffic, Taipei residents seem happy to see the monitoring system more widely used.
毕竟路上还是蛮多不遵守规则的人吧，对啊，还是很多三宝，所以对于科技执法来说，我觉得不错，可以再多增加一点。
有几个催的，他就每一台都超速了，要合理啦，什么都可以就合理啦。
Bad traffic isn't just a Taipei problem. Other Taiwan cities are expanding their AI monitoring systems too, from New Taipei in the north to Yunlin County and Kaohsiung City in the south. The aim is to make roads safer for both drivers and pedestrians, no matter where they are in the country. Howard Zhang and Erika Liu for TaiwanPlus.
Japan has overtaken China to become the largest importer of fruit from Taiwan. This comes after a Japanese company signed a deal with Taiwan's Council of Agriculture. Wismetic Foods promised to purchase over 5,000 tons of bananas and fresh and frozen pineapple annually. Japan now accounts for over 56% of Taiwan's fruit exports. China in August suspended imports of Taiwanese agricultural produce and seafood from hundreds of Taiwanese businesses. It was largely viewed as a retaliation over a visit by U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, the highest-level U.S. official to visit Taiwan in decades. A plan to help Taiwan's fish farmers weather a Chinese ban on their grouper fish is struggling to get off the ground. The government had pledged to put farmers' unsold fish on school lunch menus. But as Jean Van Trieste reports, supply chain issues mean schools in many areas can't get any.
This school cafeteria is busy preparing a special lunch for students. The star of today's menu is grouper. Usually reserved in Taiwan for important occasions, the high-end fish is being distributed to schools by the government. This is unsold stock resulting from a Chinese ban on imports. China was the largest market for Taiwanese grouper, and the ban in June was the latest in a string of food bans seen as politically motivated. China claims Taiwan as part of its territory and has employed various means of intimidation. To help grouper farmers sell their stock, the Taiwanese government set aside nearly $20 million for school lunches, planning for every elementary and middle school student in the country to eat grouper 4 times during the semester. But fully grown grouper have now found a market in places like Japan, leaving only smaller fish for school distribution. And this has led to supply chain bottlenecks.
所以变成是说它鱼刺比较小，那变成是说程序会比较繁琐。现在产能比较有缩减些许，但是我们还是会尽全力去做到那个供货动作。
Schools in 9 of Taiwan's 22 cities and counties have yet to receive any grouper at all. Officials aren't saying whether this means the plan has failed.
其他食材也可以，就是要让所有这笔钱都用在食材上面，让它可以吃得更好。
But with the current school semester nearing its end, it's unclear whether the government will be able to deliver on its promise to students. Alex Chen and John Van Trieste for TaiwanPlus.
Coming up, China eases lockdowns in Guangzhou and Shanghai, days after unprecedented protests swept its biggest cities. Details after the break.
For more stories from Taiwan and around the world, please make sure to download the TaiwanPlus app.
Welcome back. You're watching TaiwanPlus News. Today marks 2 years since the jailing of Hong Kong pro-democracy media mogul Jimmy Lai. The Apple Daily newspaper founder is currently in jail for joining unauthorized protests in 2019. He is also awaiting sentencing for a fraud conviction and is due to stand trial accused of violating Hong Kong's sweeping national security law. If found guilty, he faces a life sentence. The trial was meant to begin on December 1st, but has been delayed for 2 weeks. That's because Hong Kong's top official has appealed to Beijing for a legal interpretation, one that will allow authorities to bar Lai from hiring a British lawyer to defend him. For more on what this intervention from Beijing could mean for Hong Kong's courts, Ryan Hill-Kilpatrick spoke with Erika Liu, a non-resident fellow at Georgetown University's Center for Asian Law.
Why does Jimmy Lai want to be represented by this British barrister, Tim Owens, and why is the government so opposed to this?
Under Hong Kong's legal practitioners ordinance, overseas lawyers, including British common law barristers, they can be admitted to defend a local case under the permission of the court. So Jimmy Lai was using his legal right to employ British barristers to defend him. If a British barrister defended Jimmy Lai and during the course of the trial or after the trial, the British barristers may make some undesirable comments or disclosures of the trials that would be unfavorable to both Chinese and Hong Kong authorities. Timothy Owen could also be seen as an adjudicator of the integrity of a national security trial in Hong Kong. Timothy Owen may share his experience back to England or to the Western media. And of course, about these reasons, Beijing absolutely wants a show trial. They want to control the process and outcome of Jimmy Lai's trial as much as they can, and they could not risk of any uncertainties.
This comes at a time when Hong Kong authorities are trying to restore faith in the city and its systems, and particularly its vaunted judicial system. But do you think that this shows us that judicial independence is unsustainable under the current sort of legal framework, especially of a national security law, if Beijing can just intercede at any point? If a court, even the final court of appeal, issues a ruling that the government doesn't like?
It will give a message to the public, local public and international community that the rule of law, judicial independence and fair trial could not be maintained under the local common law system. It would be intervened and overruled by Chinese political and legal decisions. So this is a tragedy of Hong Kong's court. They hope they could maintain their autonomy and trust from Beijing by upholding the common law and by upholding their what they have been doing in the past decades or centuries. But now Beijing wants more.
Do you think there could be wider implications for overseas lawyers across the board and for overseas judges as well?
There are many rumors suggesting that Beijing will use this chance of interpreting the national security law to broaden its control over the local judges and the local legal profession, including the possibility that overseas judges or any overseas lawyers abroad shall not be involved in national security cases. Or even Beijing may create a list of designated lawyers to limit the defendant's choice of lawyers in their defense. But all of these are unverified rumors. What's more concerning is that once Beijing used this interpretation of the national security law, would it be applied to other non-national security cases, say sedition, or merely orders of freezing assets or orders of requesting information from individuals or companies? And this would be a blow. If it happened, it would be a blow to not just the local people, but also to international business community.
The United States and its allies in Asia have imposed new sanctions on North Korea over Pyongyang's repeated missiles launches. South Korea sanctioned 8 individuals, including a Taiwanese national, and 7 agencies. The U.S. put sanctions on 3 North Korean officials connected to the country's weapons program. And Japan also said 3 entities and 1 individual would face new sanctions. This year, North Korea has conducted 63 missile launches and 8 intercontinental ballistic missile tests. Some of these landed in waters near South Korea and Japan. At least 2,000 pro-democracy fighters have been killed in Myanmar since the country's military coup in February 2021. That's according to the leader of Myanmar's parallel civilian government, which is made up of leaders and lawmakers who were ousted when the military took power. During the coup, they detained the country's de facto head of state, Aung San Suu Kyi. Acting President Dua Lashila is urging those resisting the military junta to fight on. He has described the prospect of death as a price that must be paid. He is also calling on Western countries to do more to support anti-junta efforts in Myanmar.
Ukraineကိုအမေရိကန်နဲ့ EU တွေထောက်ပံ့တယ်လို့သာထောက်ပံ့နေမယ်ဆိုရင်ကျွန်တော်တို့ရဲ့ပြည်သူလူထုရဲ့တပ်ဖြတ်ခြင်းခံရတဲ့ဆင်းရဲဒုက္ခတွေကအများဆုံးပြင်းရင်းသွားမယ်လို့ကျွန်တော်တို့ခဏကလည်းပြောထားပြီးဖြစ်ပါတယ်
Days after a wave of anti-lockdown protests swept across China, authorities have eased restrictions in several cities. While locals welcome the reopening, a heavier police presence appears to be keeping demonstrators off the streets. Stash Butler reports.
Barriers come down as cities across China come out of lockdown. Shopping malls and restaurants in parts of Guangzhou are reopening after almost a month with shutters down. At least one resident couldn't contain his joy. Authorities' move to ease lockdown restrictions comes just days after unprecedented protests swept through China's cities. People called for an end to China's strict zero-COVID policy, which has rocked the economy and deprived millions of their livelihood. Beijing has promised to punish anyone involved in the protests, but Chinese authorities also appear to be softening their COVID rhetoric. On Thursday, the country's vice premier said that Omicron is less capable of causing disease than earlier COVID variants. That prompted the former editor of Chinese tabloid The Global Times to suggest China is speeding up to cast aside large-scale lockdowns. And in Guangzhou, a tower lit up with a message stressing individual, not collective action, that a person's health is ultimately their responsibility above others. The shift appears to meet, in part, protesters' demand for an end to strict lockdowns. But another goes unmet, a change of government and an end to the rule of Xi Jinping. This week, far fewer protests have broken out in China's cities, and lockdown businesses have welcomed a flood of returning customers. But whether stricter policing and looser COVID restrictions have brought the recent wave of disobedience to an end is still unclear. Alex Chen and Stash Butler for TaiwanPlus.
A team of scientists in Tanzania are using giant rats with tiny backpacks to practice saving people in the event of an emergency. The project is almost 2 years in the making and aims to show the world that rescue workers can indeed come in all shapes and sizes. Jaime Ocon reports.
At first glance, this might seem like an ordinary, very big rat, but actually, it's a candidate for the next generation of first responders. This is one of a collection of rats which are being trained to carry tiny backpacks into disaster zones. The rodents are part of a project called Rescue Rats, started by a Belgian non-profit, and the program has been operating in Tanzania since 2021. Their aim is to train rats to quickly navigate through disaster-hit areas, such as an earthquake and in debris, to find survivors.
And because the rats are just as trainable as dogs, they've got a great sense of smell, and their small size and natural agility should hopefully make them really good in this scenario where they could squeeze in small spaces and get closer to any victims.
Scientists have been training the rats to follow a unique procedure for responding to emergencies. Every rat wears a small backpack. These carry technology that enables the rat to communicate with whomever is overseeing the potential rescue mission.
So for now, the backpack only contains technology that helps us to work with the rat to find the people. So the technology it will include is a video camera, two-way audio, so that we can actually talk to people through the rat. You might have seen in some of the videos that the rat pulls a handle that's hanging around at its neck. So that will be integrated into the backpack and can remotely let us know when they've found a potential victim.
Scientists say that the type of rat used in the program is key. They use the African giant pouch rat, which are native to Tanzania. These rats have a stronger physique and longer lifespan than most other species of rodents.
So your average rat that you might see in the UK or something like that typically lives about 2 to 3 years, whereas our rats can live up to 8 to 10 years in captivity, which means that even after the training, which can take 9 months to a year, they still have quite a long working career ahead of them.
There are now plans to expand the program to other countries. If the project is successful, then these rats could go on to save lives. Damon Lin and Jaime Ocon for TaiwanPlus.
A NASA mission to the moon is on its way back to Earth. The Artemis 1 mission launched in mid-November and sent an uncrewed spacecraft into lunar orbit. After several days of tests, the craft is now coming back home. It's expected to splash down on Earth on December 11th. The mission is paving the way for future crewed flights to the moon and maybe even one day to Mars. Thank you for watching TaiwanPlus News. Remember to download the TaiwanPlus app for more stories from Taiwan and around the world. Finally today, we leave you with images of Barcelona's bike bus scheme for kids, allowing hundreds of children to cycle safely to school. I'm Erika Liu. Take care and see you next time.